This morning, I want to talk about buildings and just tell a few story about walls and buildings and that sort of thing and just space. We moved a couple of weeks ago from the not quite East Maple Ridge to Pitt Meadows, but pretty close. And we were only there for 5 years, 5.5 years or so. We were in that space. And it was pretty hard. Like we brought our youngest home from the hospital into that room. We sat up late nights watching them on the monitor and Kayam reading to Tekin, and just like these really like moments here and there where the space mattered, where the space was part of the story. And so to move and sort of say goodbye to a building, to some wood and some doorways, and it felt really weird for that to have meaning or significance, but it certainly did. And as we were on our way out, I was talking with my neighbor, and she was telling me about her recent move. She'd only been there for a few months, and so she was telling me about her move, and she was like, "Yeah, we just moved here from our family home, where all my kids, had grown up and were part of." And so these spaces have meaning, and I just wanted to tell a few stories about space and think about what are these walls? What do they do? How do we interact with them and that sort of thing? So I want to start. I tell this story a lot because I find it so significant in thinking about God and where we're at. But I want to start with Abraham because in this story, Abraham has no walls. There's no building. There's no church that he shows up at. There's no temple. There's nothing. Abraham encounters God in the world, in his life, in just experiencing people and nature. And we hear this story about Abraham who encountered God and had to take action with that. And what's beautiful about that is for the next, few generations, we hear stories about people that were following this God of their forefathers. And there's no structure. There's no A-frame building. There's no ark, or there's no structure. It's just this family encountering God. And so when they remember and when they recall, they talk about the God of our ancestors, the God of our forefathers. And their whole purpose in hearing from this God is to bless other people. And so God wasn't unique to them. There were lots of gods around, lots of things to worship, lots of idols around, lots of knickknacks and things that they put up and they asked help for. And this was normal for that time, for that place, for that people. And yet what was normal was to seek to appease those gods. It was normal to say, what I need is a healthy family. What I need is food. What I need is rain. What I need is land so that my family can grow and live and survive and carry a lineage. What I need are offspring. That was normal. What was not normal was to flip that around and to encounter a God that says, your purpose, your life, your lineage, your offspring is to go out into the world and bless other peoples and other nations. And so we start out with this beautiful story that's unstructured, that has no buildings, that has no walls, it has no enclosures. It is almost, when Jesus tells the story about that mustard seed. Have you seen a mustard plant? It's hideous. It is unruly. It explodes into this nest of a disgusting plant that is unruly but is uncontained. That's the people of Abraham, and their lineage is following this God that has no containment, that is breaking boundaries and setting things upside down. And so as time goes on and as we develop, I'm going to use a word here that's going to tip the scales. As religion develops out of that encounter with God, buildings go up, structures provide certain meaning, walls are created, sometimes to contain, sometimes to control, sometimes for the purpose of knowing exactly what we're doing. Right? So that was Abraham. Abraham encountered God everywhere, on the mountaintops, at his doorstep, other people. Everywhere Abraham went, he encountered God. He took action and he listened. I think Moses was a little bit that way too. As Moses comes along, we're gonna do a long, eye view here, bird's eye. As Moses comes along, I think Moses was a little bit like that too. Grew up in this really weird environment, but encountered God in this bush. Encountered God that was calling him to act, to take care of people. At times, people that didn't even want to be taken care of. He was called to go and liberate a people that were suffering, that were oppressed, that were hurting. And you get the same kind of sense from Moses that you got from Abraham, that there is no containment to this God. There's no walls, there's no structure. He's encountered a God in this flame of a bush that says, this is what you're called to do. And he complains about it, but he goes and does it, and he listens, and he takes action. But the Exodus story doesn't stop there. And that's where we go next. As this uncontained, uncontrollable mustard plant of a faith in God gets narrowed down into a people and into a religion, what comes next is that God moves. Packs his bags. I don't know what that looks like. Lots of boxes. Everything's just out of control. It was a disaster of a move. And gives the people a commandment to build an ark. Not like Noah's Ark. This is like a 2-meter box. It's made of wood and it's painted with gold. And it has 2 chairs on it for little angel-like creatures to sit on. This is funny, right? And in the middle, God says, I'm going to sit here with you. And everywhere the people of Israel go, Hebrew people go, this is where they encounter God, is on that box. This is from Exodus chapter 25. And have them make me a sanctuary, so that I may dwell among them. That sounds nice and beautiful, right? In accordance with all that I show you concerning the pattern of the tabernacle and of all its furniture, so you shall make it. They shall make an ark, here's the ark, of acacia wood. It shall be 2.5 cubits, 1.5 cubits wide, 1.5 cubits high, and you shall overlay it with pure gold. Inside and out you shall overlay it, and you shall make a molding of gold upon it all around. It's like a mini Trump tower. You shall cast 4 rings of gold for it and put them on its 4 feet, 2 rings on the one side of it and 2 rings on the other side. You shall make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold, and you shall put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark by which to carry the ark. And then you shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. And then cherub can sit on each side. And then verse 22 of chapter 25, there I will meet with you. And from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim that are on the ark of the covenant, I will deliver to you all my commands for the Israelites. From this uncontained, unruly, uncontrolled, encounter God everywhere you are, in every people that you meet, we now come to a place where God is literally put in a box, a gold box, of course. And what continues from there is this gold box. You can't touch it. So those poles that are attached to it, you have to carry it by the poles because you can't touch this golden box. And everywhere they go, for the next several hundred years, this box goes with them until they lost it. It's another story. We don't need to get into that. And then they build a tent everywhere they go. When they stop, they build a tent. And in this tent, they put this box, and only certain people can go in this tent to encounter God. And that's not enough. And then they build a temple. David comes along, he says, I want to build God a temple for God to live. And again, it sounds lovely. But what about that mustard seed of a God that was uncontrolled and unruly and all over the place, and you met God in people, and you met God in the ground, and you met God at the mountain peak and in the sea? Now you meet God at a box. Now you meet God, if you're lucky of the few, to meet God in a tent. And now with Solomon's temple, which is this massive construct of a temple, you meet God in the middle, in the center of the temple, only if you have the rights and privilege to go into the Holy of Holies. By the way, there's only one of you that gets to do that, so let go of that idea that you'd be the privilege. And they literally have to tie a cord around the high priest when he went in, because nobody else can go in to meet God, only him. And if something happened, a heart attack, a slip, broke his leg, if something happened, they have to drag him out by this cord. Probably tripped on that cord. That's where you meet God. And then our story, because we can't stop there, right? So the temple is destroyed, and this is fascinating to watch the theology. We don't need to do all of this. The temple is destroyed a few times, but when the temple is destroyed, and that's the place where you met God, that's the only place that you met God, there's a shift in theology. So everything that had occurred up to that point, in which the temple is the central point in our worship, has to change. Because God can't be in the temple anymore, because foreign governments destroyed the... Thanks. God can't be there anymore because the foreign governments destroyed it, because it's rubble, because somebody else lays claim to that space, to that land, to that wall. And so theology shifts, times shift, our understanding of God shifts, and it's no longer the structures of this single temple. It becomes the structures then of many temples that you can go to and worship God. And as we come onto the scene, and what's amazing that blows my mind is that Jesus tells these stories about mustard seeds, and he meets people, and he tells the stories of people that are living out their faith, and he meets people that aren't supposed to be faithful. And he says, go find your daughter. She's been made well because your faith has healed her. He touches people with leprosy. He everything that happens looks like that old, unruly, uncontrolled, uncontained mustard seed of a God that is in everything and everywhere. And so we build churches to meet God. And for many, many years, we've been building churches and saying, these are the walls. And I just wonder, back through each of these moments when walls have this significance, have this meaning, what you get out of the stories if you could hear them from the inside of the Holy of Holies. What do you get out of the story from that ark and from the temple and now from churches that have seen so much and many, many years? The cathedrals that... I was going to tell one specific story about a cathedral in Barcelona, but these walls that we begin building to meet God in are ornate with gold. They are back to our roots. They are built with centuries in mind. The cathedral in Barcelona took 3 centuries to build. 3 centuries. We can't wait 6 months to build something here. That's too long. It takes. And here we are in this beautiful A-frame building that's been here for over 100 years. Okay, not this part, but that part has been here for over 100 years. And it has stories to tell. We had a memorial service here a few months ago. Wanted to come here, to this building, because their mom had grown up a block down the street. Because she and her brothers had been baptized in this church. Years later, she had been married right here. Her children had grown up here, had been baptized right here. And there was no other place that made sense to conclude her life than to have that celebration of her life right here with these walls and this ceiling. Our buildings have some sort of meaning and purpose to them. But as we look through the history and the story of God meeting us in these buildings, on these boxes, in these tents, I have to ask, where do we meet God? It was hard to walk out of that house on the other side of Maple Ridge because of all of those times that we had met each other, that we had these moments that had value in our life, that reminded us of this 5-year period of our kids from 0 to 5 and 2 to 6 or whatever. The walls have value. But where do we meet God? And I feel like for too long, we show up in a beautiful, ornate A-frame building or gold-coated tower of a cathedral saying, this is where you're going to find God. Or maybe something very nice and plain as simple as a tent covered with a gold box sitting inside. And we say, here's where we're going to meet God. Where do you meet God? I have a feeling it has nothing to do with walls. It has nothing to do with structure. It has nothing to do with religion. But it has everything to do with a wild and unruly encountering of God in people, in nature, on the mountains, in the water, in your family. Where do you meet God?